I must admit, for a car that went into production in 1995 and went on sale in 1996, this car still looks great. It will fit right in with all of the cars we see on the road today. Well, matter of fact, I think this car would actually stand out from everything else. Whenever I do see one of these things on the road, I can't help but notice it and stare. And usually the ones I see are perfect examples and well kept. Usually owned by a mature buyer or probably somebody that purchased the car when it was new and just meticulously maintained it ever since. Now, of course, looks are subjective, but I think this is one of the best looking modern Mercedes. Sure, everyone loves the classic Gullwing SL and all that stuff, but I think the design of this first generation SLK has matured extremely well. This car was known as the R170 Mercedes SLK, and it was designed between the years of 1991 to 1993. There was a concept that came out in 1994 known as the SLK-1 concept. So of course this 1994 concept gave the public a preview of what the upcoming SLK would look like. Then later on in 1994, a second concept known as the SLK-2 went on display at the Paris Motor Show. This concept was a two-seater roadster that had a folding metal roof, and the roof took about 25 seconds to operate, give or take. So as we can see here, most of the design language of this concept actually carried over into the production model, which is a good thing because a lot of times, you guys know, they'll show off a really cool concept car only for it to get toned down so it can be feasible for production and all of that stuff. So this sporty new roadster was based on the W202 C-Class platform. It shared a lot of drivetrain and chassis components and even used a shortened version of the floor pan. And as some of you guys are aware, the platform of the R170 Mercedes SLK is also used by the Chrysler Crossfire. The Crossfire shares about 80% of its components with the Benz. Even though the Crossfire came out way later, I heard quite a few guys say they disliked the SLK just because of how terrible its evil twin was. Although they shared 80% of the components, people say they did not like the Crossfire because of its quirky styling and terrible Chrysler build quality. Now, me personally, I never sat inside a Crossfire, so I can't comment on the build quality. But either way, the SLK is a good car in its own right, and doesn't deserve to have its reputation tarnished because of the Crossfire. This car even pioneered the design language for the triangular taillights that could be found on just about every Mercedes in the early 2000s. The SLK went on sale at a time when the C-Class looked like this, what you see on the screen, and the S-Class looked like this. So when these cars were redesigned, I thought it was kinda cool how they adopted the triangular tail lamps, kinda similar to what was found on the SLK. And a lot of the Mercedes cars did end up getting taillights like this, but I'm not going to name every single model. At first, the SLK-200 compressor was exported and sold exclusively to places like Italy, Portugal, and Greece, just to name a few. But after the 2000 mid-cycle refresh, Mercedes decided to just go ahead and sell the SLK-200 compressor in other markets as well. And speaking of the 2000 mid-cycle refresh, let's go ahead and discuss that a bit. Production for the refresh models began after February 2000, and there were quite a few major changes. The refresh got you redesigned front and rear bumpers and new taillights. There were now body-colored side skirts and door handles. For example, here's a 1998 SLK-230 with the non-painted side skirts and door handles. Here's another example that you see here on the screen. And here's one more example. But I think if you got the Sport package or the AMG design package, I'm not sure exactly what the name was, you could get body-colored side skirts. For example, the one you see here on the screen is a 1999. And it has the Sport package, and as you can see, it has the body colored side skirts. Now, as you guys know, I'm not usually a fan of mid-cycle refreshes, but this one turned out good. So throughout various markets and throughout its production run, the SLK offered quite a few different engines to choose from. There was the naturally aspirated SLK-200, then there was the SLK-200 compressor, the SLK-230 compressor, And of course, compressor is another way of saying that the engine is supercharged. Then there was the SLK-320, and last but not least, the SLK-32 AMG. Speaking of the AMG, this one is actually the rarest of the SLKs. SLK-32 production started from January 2001 to March 2004. A little over 4,300 of them were produced. Almost 1,000 of them were sold in Germany. A little more than 2,000 were imported to North America, and just a tick over 260 went to the UK. So when the SLK-32 came out in 2001, it was designed to go up against things like the BMW Roadster and the Porsche Boxster S. The engine used here was really just an upgraded version of the engine used in the SLK-320, but the AMG was supercharged and it had a whopping 349 horsepower. Also for 2001, a 6-speed manual transmission was introduced, and this replaced the existing 5-speed manual transmission. So this first generation entered production in 1995, and this production spanned all the way until spring 2004. There were over 300,000 of these manufactured, so yes, they are still quite abundant, and there are a lot of well-kept examples out there. Even though this car had a long production run, I think it still looked fresh all the way up until it was due for a new generation. So speaking of the new generation, that came out in 2004 and went on sale for 2005. This one was known as the R171 SLK. I guess the design of this car was kinda evolutionary. I don't know what to think here. Sound off in the comments if you think this design was an evolution of the first generation or a revolution. One thing I did like about the second generation was the SLK-55 AMG. They decided to cram a naturally aspirated 5.4 liter V8 in this relatively tiny car. The 55 looked way more aggressive too. It sat a little lower along with a stiffer suspension, had 18-inch alloy wheels and an AMG body kit, and it cranked out 355 horsepower. Car and Driver tested one of these and clocked a 0 to 60 time of a staggering 4.3 seconds. So yeah, the performance was there if you got the AMG. But let me know if you prefer the looks of this one over this one. The 55 had a good amount of power, no doubt about that, but it only made slightly more power than what was in the previous AMG with its supercharged V6. Alright guys, so that's it for this one. Me personally, I wouldn't mind owning one of these, and call me crazy, but I would take one of these over an SL. I know that sounds ridiculous, but just from a styling perspective, yeah, I would take this over the SL. Alright guys, so sound off in the comments and I'll catch you on the next one.